This is WWE superstar Drew McIntyre, and you're listening to the WWE Podcast.
The champ is
the one that everybody wants, me.
It's going to WrestleMania. Claymore!
Austin 316 says I just whipped your ass. This is my iron. You're going to acknowledge me.
All right, everybody, welcome to the WWE Current State, and we are here with Anthony DeMarco, and tonight's a little bit different. You're going to hear him from a phone, so if you're wondering why the quality of it is not exactly what you're used to, it's because we're joined this evening on his cell phone instead of the normal setup, and we almost didn't get him tonight, but luckily we did, and I thank everybody who reached out and asked to be on the show, but we will put you in the bank for another time, but right now we're joined by every week. Anthony DeMarco, how's it going, man?
Doing well, man, and like you said, doing it a bit remote tonight, and originally we didn't think we'd be able to connect, but luckily we have been able to work something out, even if it's not the best quality. But I'm looking forward to being here tonight because I think there's a lot of things to talk about for a change, because it felt like in the terms of the broader scale of WWE, we were in a holding pattern until Crown Jewel, but now that we're about 8 days post-Crown Jewel, or 9 days actually, it feels like we're starting to get some actual movement in the landscape of the company.
It does, and I guess that leads to my first question is, how do you feel about Triple H's booking overall? I mean, it's a pretty loaded question. There's a lot that you could dive into, but with the limited time we have, how do you feel about the philosophies he's adopted, the way he's booked talent? Just some general thoughts.
Well, you know, I've seen a lot of people kind of go against Triple H recently, specifically since Monday Night Raw last week on the failed cash-in on the United States Championship of Austin Theory. And look, I certainly agree that it has been far from perfect. Like, I think that Monday Night Raw is still largely unwatchable, although I don't really blame that completely on Triple H. I just think that on a weekly show like Raw or SmackDown for that matter, I think filling a 3-hour time slot is just so difficult, because I think the main topics of Raw or main storylines of Raw have been decent lately. Like, I like Bobby Lashley. I really like what they're doing with Seth Rollins, especially now that it seems like he's going babyface. But there's just so much, you know, for lack of better terms, garbage that has to be put in because you're filling a 3-hour time slot. So Raw could certainly use work. I think that the women's division has kind of fallen flat a bit. Obviously, on SmackDown specifically, they're kind of going back to the well with Shotzi. But I think overall with Triple H, it's been good because, A, even if I don't like something, it feels like everything matters. Everything has a meaning behind it, which I can appreciate. And second of all, I think every pay-per-view is borderline must-watch now, because that's not to say that there weren't good pay-per-views under Vince McMahon, because I think for the most part they always had a good WrestleMania or the Royal Rumble, you know, aside from maybe years 14 and 15, were really entertaining. Like, the big pay-per-views always connected. But nowadays, I feel like you can tune in and watch a Crown Jewel and it feels like really, really important. Or even an Extreme Rules from, a month and a half ago at this point, felt like a really legitimate pay-per-view without a world title on the show to boot. So I think that between how SmackDown has been, because I think it goes without saying that SmackDown has continued to be very quality, and how good the pay-per-views have been, we've been able to live with some of the shortcomings, Raw specifically.
Yeah, I mean, it's difficult for me to respond to all of that, but kind of cherry picking some of the things you said, I would agree that the women's division has been, it's been a bit flat, especially on Raw, but on SmackDown, I think it's been largely, kind of in transition, or rather a holding pattern until WrestleMania season, because, don't forget, guys, we have 2 months between the Survivor Series event and the next pay-per-view. Literally 2 months. That's a hell of a long time. 8 weeks of TV that they have to fill. So there's going to be a lot of kind of holding pattern and mini feuds going on that eventually will lead to a Royal Rumble beginning of WrestleMania season. And we have Ronda Rousey right now messing around with Shotzi that we all know is going to go nowhere, and Shotzi has no chance of winning. And on Raw, you have Bianca Belair And you have Bailey, who I think that's kind of fading out, as Rhea Ripley still has yet to really establish herself in that matchup. And I mean, I don't know how we haven't had a Rhea Ripley Bianca Belair matchup yet. That has to be on the forefront at some point. But then there's a returning Charlotte. Where does Charlotte fit into things? You have Becky Lynch probably returning in a month or two, right in time for WrestleMania season, that we all think she's going to go to SmackDown and Charlotte's going to Raw. So there's a lot of movement going on, and I think that as we get closer and closer to the end of the year, and specifically towards Rumble, I think the women's division is going to heat up a lot. But to your point about Triple H and everything feeling important, is yes, everything does feel important. Now, there's still some kind of filler garbage stuff that happens, but that's, I think, maybe some holdover from Vince McMahon, or he has some kind of influence every show where he gets this kind of one segment allowability to have some influence, and they're just giving him it out of respect of like, hey, Vince, what do you want to see this week? And he's like, I want to see some 24/7 title, pal. And that, luckily, that's been kind of wrapped up, we hope, and put in the garbage, literally. But yeah, I would agree largely that Triple H, things have meaning. Production has been at an all-time high and doing things a little bit differently, even if it's subtle. And one subtle thing, and this is the last thing I'll say, and I'll point it to you, is this past week on SmackDown, with Roman Reigns was watching the Usos on TV. He wasn't standing facing the camera side-eyeing a television. He was actually sitting on a damn chair watching a television like you would normally watch it. And whether that was purposeful or not, it's little things like that to me that I notice.
Yeah, for sure. And it's even things that you don't necessarily agree with. Look, I'm going to be this is a huge, bold prediction, and I think I'm the only one that's probably thinking about this right now. But I'm probably wrong. I'll just preface it by saying that I'm probably wrong. I think that they're planning Austin Theory to be the one to dethrone Roman Reigns. I honestly, truly believe that, because there is no justification other than that for the way that they've booked him to this point under Triple H. And I think the one critique I had about the Austin Theory booking under Vince, because I like Austin Theory, he has charisma, he looks the part, he's a good worker, but it was too much too fast. He was barreling down the road of the Roman Reigns treatment, except he was a heel, which made it more stomachable, but I still felt like it was too much too fast. And I could just talk to myself personally, and I think a lot of people felt this way, is that it just felt also rushed with Austin Theory. He was back on the main roster in November of last year, and then all of a sudden he was being pushed to the moon. And I think what Triple H is doing is really kind of scaling it back here and letting us think that he's being buried. The crowd is organically going to get behind him, and then he's going to pull the trigger. And that's something that, even if I don't necessarily agree with it, I think it makes sense. But before I go any further, what do you think of that bold prediction of myself, of Austin Theory?
It's certainly bold. There's no doubt about it. Do I agree with it off the bat? No, but that doesn't mean that it's not possible, because of the fact that when Vince McMahon was pushing Theory before the whole scandal happened, I kind of saw, and I think most fans did, that we saw what Vince saw. He, as you said, he looks the part. He's young. He's got a lot of years in front of him, barring injury or he just decides to leave the industry. He can really go in the ring. There's really, and also promo. I mean, I think he's well ahead of his years in promo ability of where he should be and where he is. So I absolutely see why Vince was gravitating to him, but it could have been a too much too soon case, and maybe Triple H saw some warning signs of hey, we should probably scale it back before we push this guy too hard, too fast, and things explode. So I'm not saying no, but I also think that if they're going to take it off Roman Reigns and Austin Theory is going to be the one to do it, I mean, they got a lot of work to do on Austin Theory before he can get there, which tells me that if it's Austin Theory, there's going to be a long time before he's ready, which means there's going to be a long time before Roman Reigns drops the belt. So, I mean, we just at this point are going from pay-per-view to pay-per-view, or at least even jumping ahead 3 to 4 months in pay-per-views to even think about when Roman could drop the belt. And that's been, I know, the focus of many of our conversations is who could drop the belt, or who could he drop the belt to? When is it possible? This and that. And now, of course, you have Drew McIntyre back into the fold, and we'll get to that in a minute. But yeah, I don't think it's certainly not a dumb idea at all. Do I think of that off the cuff? No. That would be one of those bets that you would make a ton of money on if you're right. To me, I think it's in the realm of possibility, but it's not likely. I still think that if you're going to ask me who's going to drop the belt to, I still believe it's Bray Wyatt, Cody Rhodes, or Drew McIntyre. I think it's probably one of those three guys. Those are probably the front runners right now. But Austin Theory it's not a dumb idea at all, and I'm not trying to say it is. I just don't think right now it's likely.
Yeah, the only reason I really thought about it is because I don't get another justification for burying him like they did. Because, look, I don't think putting the Money on the Bank briefcase on him that fast was the right call, because I think that it was just too much too soon for him. And you had kind of booked yourself into a corner with, like, well, how are we going to book this guy? Because I do agree that it was too fast, too soon for Austin Theory to win the championship. And I don't know, did you read that report of the original planned finish for a Clash of the Castle? Did you see that online?
I saw, and correct me if I'm wrong, but I thought it had something to do with being splitting the championships like I had proposed, and many others. Yeah. It was the splitting of the championships, right?
Yeah, so essentially that Theory would have cashed in mid-match, like kind of similar to what Seth Rollins did back in 2015 at WrestleMania, but he would have cashed in solely for the WWE Championship, and then he would have gotten interfered with by Tyson Fury, which would have led to a Claymore by Drew, and Drew would have won the championship. So either way, even if that is true, their plan since Triple H took the helm was to get the briefcase off of this guy. I think the way that they did it was kind of embarrassing, specifically because he cashed in on the United States title. And look, I get what they're trying to do with the U.S. title. I appreciate it, trying to make it feel more important. But I still don't really understand why they would do that, because it's just embarrassing for him. He's the only guy, I think, ever to cash in on a non-world championship. And then to lose it on, to boot, And the only other reason I could think of is because they're trying to kind of swerve us in another way, whereas Vince, kind of coined SummerSlam from 2020, you'll never see it coming, because I can't imagine that Triple H doesn't see Theory for a very popular, or not so much popular, but a guy with a ton of potential moving forward. And maybe I just think they were trying to avoid what happened with Orton in 2004, where his first world title reign was just such a disaster, that they were trying to get people to maybe want Austin Theory to win that championship back. And I think that maybe if you start transitioning Theory to a babyface, obviously that's a very long-term goal because he's so overblown as a heel right now, I think that would be, advantageous for them as well, because I think that there's a severe lack of top babyfaces on the main roster right now. And I think that's why you've seen Seth turn babyface, why they've continued to have Drew as a babyface, why Bray Wyatt returned as a babyface. But those guys, what is that, midterm at the very longest? I think Austin Theory is a guy that you absolutely would benefit more from as being a long-term babyface. And look, I don't think this is coming probably to fruition. It's just the only thing that I could justify in my head for why Triple H, booked him as he did.
Look, the way you put it and explained it does make sense to me. I think there's an equal chance that they simply just want to cool him off, build him in a way that makes sense and is kind of from the ground up, and giving him, put him back from the spotlight, because maybe Triple H and management are seeing things that are not good and maybe are reflective of the Roman Reigns run when they tried to make him and force him down the throats of fans for 7 years as a babyface, that the fans just, more often than not, rejected it. And we have maybe Austin Theory in that same boat. Of course, he's a heel versus a babyface, but I think it could be the same thing. And maybe they're seeing something that we don't. And it's just a simple explanation of, hey, we want to get this off of him. This is not the way that we want him to be a champion or win his first major championship. And he was the U.S. champion at one point, but I'm talking about the top championship, right? So I think that it could be that simple, that they're just trying to just scale him back. He's not the one who's going to beat Roman, but maybe in time, if Roman's still champion in a year, you could have that discussion. But at the same time, Roman Reigns losing to a young up-and-coming star is exactly what we've been advocating for since he won the belt. And that's what we've been saying that we hope happens, is that it should be dropped to somebody that can carry the company for the next few years and use that to springboard their career, versus somebody like a Kevin Owens or a Seth Rollins or a Drew McIntyre or a Cody Rhodes, that really it would it would help them. It would help their career, but not in the way that it could somebody who is just getting going in the business. So from that perspective, there's a much better argument to be made for Theory than any of those four guys.
Yeah, exactly. And I guess that would transition to like the next part of our talk right now is that they're going ahead with War Games at the Survivor Series, which we had discussed last week. So I guess we could put that feather in our cap that we predicted that right. And presumably Kevin Owens is going to be the fifth guy on the team to oppose the Bloodline. But now there's rumors that he tore or pulled his MCL or whatever, strained it, whatever he did to his knee at a house show. So if that's the case, do you think Seth Rollins is a slam dunk to be the fifth guy?
If he wasn't U.S. champion, I would say yeah, but he is a babyface, and WWE doesn't care about the brand split because there isn't one. There's only one when they need it to happen, and there is one when it's convenient as well. So they're right now having their cake and eating it too. We all know about the brand split. It doesn't exist only when they need it to exist for storyline reasons. So Seth Rollins could absolutely be that part of that. And if they're going to kind of put the U.S. title match, if they're going to put it off the card and they're going to focus more on the War Games match, then yeah, I think he's a slam dunk. But what I saw happen on Raw doesn't make sense to me that it would happen, because you have Bobby Lashley now who's seemingly turning heel if he's not already heel, and you have Austin Theory in here, and it could very well be a triple threat at Survivor Series for the U.S. title with Bobby Lashley, Austin Theory, and Seth Rollins. So that could be the case, and I actually think that's the more likely scenario, because Seth is still the champion. And to have Seth Rollins, the U.S. champion, buried in a rivalry that he really has no business in, outside of the Roman Reigns business, there's really no reason for him to be there. And what are Theory and Lashley going to do? So I unless he's doing double duty, I think that is unlikely. Unless Kevin Owens, the injury reports aren't correct, I don't think Seth Rollins would be that fifth person. What do you think?
Yeah, you make a valid point, because you obviously want some championships defended at the pay-per-view, and the WWE or the Universal or, my God, the Undisputed title. They got so many names that I can't keep track of it. But the Undisputed title isn't going to be defended, and that leaves the Intercontinental and the title that's, presumably the, how would you say it, the second most important. Like, I guess at this point on the main roster, the U.S. title is the second most important championship, right? Because it's the main one on Raw.
Yeah. Even though the Intercontinental has a much longer lineage, and who it's on is, I think, a perfect place for it. Yeah, you would think that the way they're showcasing the U.S. title, it is the number 2 title in the company right now.
Yeah. So, and it would beg the question, like, if they're going to have like a world title exclusively on one show, shouldn't be the Intercontinental be the one solo on Raw because of the lineage? But that's what we don't want to dive too deep into. But I would assume that you want the Intercontinental and the U.S. title defended on this show, which kind of leaves them in a precarious spot, because the thing is that we have an opportunity to really elevate these titles. And while Seth Rollins makes the most sense from a historical and a booking standpoint to go against Roman Reigns and his faction, you don't want to kind of how would you say, keep that another championship hostage? Because I get that Survivor Series has historically been more of a gimmick pay-per-view, as the championship matches have kind of been secondary. Like, when's the last time a world title was actually defended at Survivor Series? Like, if I'm being honest, I can't even think of it, because it's been championship versus championship for so long. I actually think it was Survivor Series 2019 when it was Brock versus Rey Mysterio. I think that's the last time a world title was defended at a Survivor Series, but don't quote me on that. And now, although they're going away from the brand split or the brand versus brand gimmick, they're still going with the 5-on-5 gimmick, which they even did in the Ruthless Aggression and Attitude Era. So I can't blame them for that either. But even if you're going to do that and not have a world title defended, you have to make do with, or make the most of defending your mid-card titles.
Yeah, definitely. I think that they're trying, and I think that they're eventually going to hit a brick wall where they're thinking or say to themselves, hey, look, I think that the the top belt has to be split or it has to come off Roman, because we've kind of reached the maximum that we can with how much mileage we're going to get out of pushing those two belts. And I really, when you think back of what those two belts meant a year ago, I mean, it's a joke compared to what they are now, which is, I mean, I got to give everybody credit who's involved with those decisions, that those two belts feel infinitely more important and feel right where they should be and are going to continue to be elevated as long as Roman Reigns holds that championship. So, but as I look at this roster, and I pulled up the SmackDown roster, I'm trying to figure out, again, if it comes from SmackDown, because of barring somebody from the Monday Night Raw roster coming over, I'm looking on it, and I really don't know. I mean, Big E is still out. And I don't know if he's close to returning. He seems like he's, based on the injury reports, progressing nicely. But it wouldn't make sense for him to team up with the Brawling Brutes in Ridge Holland, the very man that broke his neck. So that doesn't make sense, even if he returned. You have, Ricochet, but he's getting involved in the Intercontinental Championship picture. Maybe it's Massey. No, I mean, I don't know. I mean, you have Shinsuke. It's possible. I mean, Shinsuke Nakamura lost the World Cup first round this past week. I mean, I really don't know, because Sami Zayn, I would imagine. Let me ask you that too, as we're pondering over the fifth person for the babyface team of Drew and the Brawling Brutes teaming up together. But with Sami Zayn, do you think he's the fifth person? I mean, he has to be, right? He has to be the fifth person for the Bloodline?
Oh, yeah, for sure, 100%. Like, I think the only reason he wasn't on SmackDown this past week, I think it was because he had a death in his family. We're not sure, but I think I read that online somewhere. And, yeah, I think he's hands down the fifth guy for the Bloodline, because I think this is going to be an opportunity to advance the storyline of the interior struggle, or the internal struggle, rather, of the Bloodline faction, specifically between Jay and Sami. And I think eventually, sometime before WrestleMania, presumably around Royal Rumble, we're going to get the Sami Zayn inevitable, I guess, kicking out or excommunication. There's the term I'm looking for, the excommunication from the Bloodline, which I think that eventually is going to happen. And I think that Survivor Series and the match that happens, and probably the match within the match that happens between Jay and Sami and Roman seeing it front and center, is going to play a big role in that. But to your point about the babyface side of things, I mean, I saw that he got injured, but I would assume maybe Rey Mysterio could maybe plug that hole if he's healthy. I feel like that would kind of make a lot of sense. To your point, Shinsuke Nakamura, 100% would make a lot of sense. But if not, if all else fails, like, maybe they give that kind of Madcap Moss a look. Easy enough for me to say. I could see them just giving Moss a look just because of him being an up-and-comer and not being terrible in the ring, but he could be like an easy out for the Bloodline, like the first elimination or whatever, and giving them a first big taste of a main event level match. But aside from that, if it isn't Kevin Owens, I think it's really kind of a pick of the litter, and I don't think anyone would be that consequential.
No, which is weird, because usually the final participant is the biggest name. I mean, that's kind of what follows, where they bring in some big name, everyone goes crazy, all the odds have tipped in the favor of the baby faces. But in this case, it could be kind of vanilla, like Madcap Moss, who doesn't really excite anyone at this point. I think he's just kind of mildly appreciated by the fans. He's really good in the ring. He's a tough dude, looks like $1 million. But yeah, I mean, it could be just kind of anticlimactic, and it could be Madcap Moss. He seems to be the case, and I would point towards Rey Mysterio as well. But the problem is, I've heard that he has a mild ankle injury, nothing serious, but that it could keep him out for a few weeks. So I don't think that is the case. If the Rey Mysterio is questionable, I would have actually said Logan Paul, given the whole storyline with Roman and Logan. But Logan Paul is injured, so there's a lot of injuries going on right now that really kind of mitigate who could be that fifth person for the babyfaces. So regardless of who it is, I guess let me ask you, what do you think the outcome is if there is nothing on the line other than pride? I would imagine there's nothing on the line. We'll learn this coming week for sure if there's anything on the line. But it looks like if it's 5-on-5, I don't know how you could include any kind of title opportunity in there. But what do you think happens in the matchup? Do you think the Bloodline are going to be victorious?
Yeah, I think they're going to lose, to be honest with you. And I remember back in 2004, and back then, for whatever reason, they were doing 4-on-4 instead of 5-on-5, maybe to speed up the match more. But I remember on one side you had Chris Benoit, Chris Jericho, Maven, and I forget who the fourth one was. I think it was Shelton Benjamin or whatever. And then on the other, it was Randy Orton because he had just turned babyface. And on the heel side, it was Triple H, then world champion, Batista, Edge, and Gene Snitsky. And I remember one of the stipulations was that if the babyface team won, they could give themselves a chance at the World Heavyweight Championship. Each member earned an opportunity for the world title, or each member was like the GM for Raw for a week, which would presumably lead to themselves booking themselves in a match for the world title. So I don't know if they go something down the road of that, where like if the babyface team wins, Sheamus and Drew get a chance at the Undisputed Championship. I don't know if there's a day one pay-per-view this year, but maybe at the day one pay-per-view it would be a triple threat between Roman, Drew, and Sheamus, or if not, maybe a triple threat at the Royal Rumble, which would leave a 2-month span to kind of book that and probably be a really fun triple threat match. So could you see something like that, of like a kind of an out-of-the-box stipulation for this?
I would think there's got to be something on the line. I mean, if they don't, I won't hate it. I won't be surprised, because I think that what's going to sell this is the gimmick itself, right? The actual structure. If people haven't seen a War Games match before, it's 2 rings. They'll sell it with video packages and how much steel and how many tons of steel are involved, or, you know, how many bodies and how many pounds of flesh are in the ring. They'll kind of sell it with stats and things like that, which may be enough for most people, but for others, I think they're going to want some kind of stipulation on this. Now, I don't think it'll have to do with Roman Reigns' championship, I wouldn't think, but it's difficult to reward 5 people for this matchup, and maybe it will only be if somebody beats the Bloodline, whoever that person is, maybe it's whoever scores the pinfall or submission is rewarded with something. It is singular, even though they're on a team. Perhaps it is whoever gets the victory. If somebody pins the Bloodline, that individual gets an opportunity at a future opportunity, very vague, at Roman Reigns' championship. I don't know what the Bloodline would get. I mean, I don't even know in what scenario you could give the Bloodline to reward them. They've seemingly got everything already. But maybe it's that. Maybe it is a singular rewarding method, but even though it's on a team, depending on who pins who. Unless is this elimination?
Well, I'll be very transparent. Like, I'm not well versed to the rules of War Games. I don't know. It's the double cage, right? And the double ring beside each other. That's essentially what it is. So, like, I'm not sure if it's going to be the traditional Survivor Series rules within the double cage in the War Games format, or if it's just going to be like, I don't know if you remember the Invasion pay-per-view way back when it was dubbed the inaugural brawl, and it was just the first pin to the finish. So maybe they go back to that. Maybe within the context of War Games, that would make more sense, and it would be kind of easier to digest. Because if you start putting like a traditional 5-on-5 match in War Games, maybe, who knows? Like, I've never watched a War Games match. I don't know the rules, but like, I would assume because it's Survivor Series, they would stick to the traditional Survivor Series format of 5-on-5 elimination, but now that it has the War Games aspect to it, who knows, right?
Yeah, I mean, I also am on that side, and I know there's a lot of people out there that have seen War Games before. I have nothing against it. I don't know if I like it or I don't. This is my first time seeing it, quote unquote, live for the first time, so I'll be able to make my judgment after I see it. But if it's elimination, I think that would be in keeping with tradition. I actually loved the 5-on-5 scenario. I really did. I loved the 5-on-5 traditional Survivor Series matchup. Very clearly, I remember Team Austin versus Team Bischoff in one of the better 5-on-5 elimination matches that was just so dramatic, coming down to Shawn Michaels on a 3-on-1 scenario, nearly beating Randy Orton until Batista came in, and that was one of my favorites. Team Cena versus the Team Authority. I mean, like, even most recently, so that to me is a fun format, but for whatever reason, it eventually morphed into the manufactured rivalry between brands, and now Triple H has done away with that, as well as done away with the gimmick pay-per-views. I'm sure you've seen that already too, right? Triple H has gotten rid of Hell in a Cell and I think even Elimination Chamber pay-per-views. So he's seemingly realizing the value of those matches and not just plugging them into the schedule. So did you see that as well?
Well, I saw Hell in a Cell and Money in the Bank that he's going to abolish. But Elimination Chamber, I know that for a fact that at least for next year, it's not going to be abolished because they're having it here in Montreal in February.
Oh, okay.
So the Elimination Chamber is still a go, and I'm kind of, I guess a bias me speaking, but I'm very happy about that because it's going to be here in Montreal. And actually, a fun fact or a sad fact, depending which way you look at it, it's the first pay-per-view to be held in Montreal since Breaking Point in September of 2009. And I believe that was the tag team submission match between Legacy and D-Generation X. So pretty cool for Montreal to get a pay-per-view for the first time in over 13 years. But yeah, I agree. And I do think that they should go that way with Elimination Chamber too. Because I understand that in a match like that, it is a larger scale match. And even Money in the Bank, I don't think it was the end of the world that you had that as its own pay-per-view, because I do think it's become a very big part of WWE. But not just to say Hell in a Cell, TLC, even Extreme Rules to a certain point. I think this Extreme Rules was better than most because they made an effort to make all the matches some kind of gimmick match. But I've never liked the gimmick pay-per-views, aside from the Royal Rumble, of course, because it's just been such a staple in WWE for, over 30 years now. So, yeah, I'm a very big fan of that. Hopefully they go away from that with the Elimination Chamber as well. Maybe just go back to the traditional No Way Out, because when I was growing up, that was always the last stop before WrestleMania, the pay-per-view between Rumble and WrestleMania, which back then was historically a SmackDown exclusive pay-per-view. But I think it would be cool. And I think if you rebooted a lot of the old school pay-per-views, maybe Armageddon, Vengeance, Judgment Day, that'd be really cool for nostalgic purposes as well.
And one more question, because I know we're going to wrap up here in a second. A little off topic, but Sasha Banks, do you think she returns at Survivor Series? It's in Boston. She's hinting about something that she's been working on for 6 months or something. Or do you think that is nothing to do with wrestling? It's something else that she's doing. But, I mean, everything seems to be aligning for a Sasha Banks return in Boston at Survivor Series. Do you think it happens or not?
I mean, I'm going to say yes, just based on Triple H's kind of history or short history since coming into WWE, where he is very big on returns. Sasha Banks, I think, is someone that they could use her star power. We just talked about, Raw's women division feeling kind of flat. SmackDown's going through a transition. I would assume she'll go over to Monday Night Raw. That would be my guess. Maybe try and go up against Bianca Belair again. Or unless you bring back her as a babyface and she's kind of a stopgap to Ronda Rousey before getting to presumably Becky Lynch for WrestleMania, as you alluded to before. But I think so. Look, I haven't missed Sasha Banks as much as I would have thought, because once upon a time she was my favorite women's wrestler, but we're talking about several years now. But it's weird. Maybe it's because her real-life character or real-life personality, I guess is a better way to phrase it, is kind of off-putting to me that I haven't really missed her. But I do kind of acknowledge that she would be a big add to a women's division that I think could use a kick in the ass, for lack of better terms.
Yes, definitely. I mean, they've got 3 of the 4 horsewomen out right now. They don't have Charlotte, they don't have Becky, they don't have Sasha. Presumably Naomi may be not too far behind, and maybe they're going to be the ones to challenge Io Sky and Dakota Kai. That's why they won the belts. Partially, maybe that's why they won the belts back at Crown Jewels, to be able to face Sasha Banks and Naomi and pick up where they left off. Just an assumption on my part, but yeah, I mean, I'm not a big fan of Sasha Banks, as you all know. At least seemingly in real life, she seems obnoxious, a little bit arrogant, and all that kind of thing, but that's just the way I interpret her personality. It's not exactly attractive to me, but you can't deny her stardom, you can't deny the impact she's had in the women's division, and she's really good in the ring. But if they bring her back babyface, they turn her so many times, I don't know what they're going to do with her. I mean, when they bring her back, she'll get cheered, but then she'll turn on somebody. I mean, who knows? But that seems to be what they do with her. I don't understand it, but all right, well, guys, before we head out, I want to let you know Anthony DeMarco did a retro this past week, Royal Rumble 2003, the one that I believe came down to Kane and Stone Cold Steve Austin, if I'm not mistaken, right?
You are mistaken, unfortunately. That was 2001. It actually came down to It came down
Triple
to
H.
Brock. Yeah, nope, that's 2002. It came down.
I'm getting closer. Damn it, I'm getting closer. Okay, go ahead.
Slowly but surely you'll get there. But yeah, no, it came down to Brock, and it was kind of like a four-way. It was Brock, Batista, Taker, and Kane. And it came down to Brock and Undertaker, but they were only in the ring together by themselves for like a matter of seconds. But yeah, it was a very big pay-per-view in the way of really kind of solidifying Brock as, at that time, although we know that it was very short-lived, as the baby face and the face of the company of the future. And as we know, he would only last in WWE for another 14 months or so before walking away in early 2004. But at that time, it really was a change of the guard, them pushing Brock Lesnar, rightfully so, to the moon. And the first time that a Royal Rumble had not featured Rock or Stone Cold Steve Austin. So definitely a big transition period in WWE at that time. So I thought it was important to cover.
Yeah, definitely, and important. If you don't know who it came down to, like myself, I'll go have to listen to the show. Apparently, I thought I did, and I'm like, maybe in my head. But guys, go check that out. I think that it's an important Royal Rumble to listen to as we get closer and closer to Royal Rumble too, guys. We're only 2 months away from the Royal Rumble that is coming up faster than we realize. And again, between Survivor Series and Rumble, there's nothing on the schedule. So after this coming next weekend, I believe it is, in a week or so, week and a half, we've got the next pay-per-view, and that's it for 2 months. So everybody go check that out. And Anthony, you enjoy the rest of your night. I hope we didn't interrupt your work too much, and we will be talking next week.
Yeah, man, looking forward to it. You take care.
You too.
Thanks for listening to the WWE Podcast. Don't forget to subscribe on your favorite podcast app so you don't miss a show, or head to WWEpodcast.com. And for all of these shows ad-free, head over to patreon.com/WWE Podcast. Until then, we'll see you next time.